Hello, this is Above the Treeline Canyon Commentary, Episode 2, where we talk about what happens when your career gets as unstable as a scree field at 13,000 feet. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to get out of the way here is that I am not interested in blaming anyone or naming anyone, any company, any person, anyone that was involved or may have been involved in this. And if you recognize what I am about to talk about, please keep the details to yourself. I am monitoring the comments, so let's just please be respectful. The second thing to bring up is that this isn't something that happened overnight. It wasn't quick, it wasn't immediate, and I could make the case that I even saw the landslide happen months or even years in advance. I just didn't know what I was going to have to do to get out of its way. Right, so things happen, all part of working for a big company. But sometimes, the way the facts happen on the ground, the way things are perceived, like for example, you find things happening in the news and you learn about what's happening from the news more than you hear from your own leaders, which is incredibly demoralizing when you wonder what's going on, why are we keeping things quiet when we don't need to be. It's not there's a whole lot that can go into that too, but I digress. And then there's when the inevitable financial implications of those big events start rearing their ugly heads. You start seeing things like furloughs and layoffs, and you decide to say, well, these things are coming, but you keep the details kind of under wraps. Who's affected, how many are going to be affected, and people start really asking themselves the difficult questions. Are you going to be impacted by this? It's a huge effect on morale, right? So where do we go? Well, you start taking these big picture things, these things you don't have any control over, you're not involved in these big picture, events. You're not involved in them, your team is not involved in them, your people are not involved in them, but they still have an impact on you because of how big your company is and the reach that it has. So you find that, again, in big companies, work dries up, priorities change. So you find that a program that you've been on for a long time, well, they reassign you. They put you on some nice research projects, the kind that can even lead to patents, and the kind that can lead to if you're winning your company a lot of new business. You can do your best work. You can ride the wave, ride the negative press, ride the furloughs and layoffs, and just kind of put your head down, do your best work, move on. Well, lo and behold, I find that I'm getting moved off of those projects too for a number of different reasons. Some of it I think it might have been political, I don't know. They say it was for my own protection, but I'm not sure I believe that either. It could be wrong, but that's how I perceived it. Being moved off a project where I thought I could do my best work and prove my value, only to be told, go sit in the corner for whatever. And somebody who, when the words no longer seem to match what people are actually doing, that's when you start losing trust, right? You no longer start listening or believing the people pointed above you that what they're saying is genuine or honest, even if they're trying to do their best to supposedly shield you from what's coming. Well, it might have been, what would you assume if you were in my position? Work dries up, you get put basically in a corner, pulled off projects where you think you can do your best work, and then all the while you're being told difficult decisions have to be made. And you think, well, what does this mean? Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious. You think you understand where I'm coming from, or you think that this could be, I'm completely out of my depth, completely over my head. Speak up. It's like, if this has ever been a situation that you've been in, let me know in the comments. But how would you respond to a situation like this? And on top of the stress that this was creating, it started turning physiological or psychological issues into physical ones. So I had to make a decision that I really didn't want to make at the time. Again, I'm not blaming anyone in particular. I'm not naming names. But perception appears to be reality for someone who's on the ground, who's just doing the work. And he says, like, okay, we've fallen on hard times, hard decisions have to be made. You're not telling us what's going on, who's affected, who's impacted. So you pull people off their best work, projects that they think they can prove their value, sidelined. Just then they say, well, it's for your own protection, but I don't really believe that. What would you do? How would you think? So, kind of carrying this to the next logical step here. For those of you folks work for a big company, just bear in mind, these things do happen. You're going to get work. Your work is going to be reassigned. You're going to get moved on to different tasks, different projects. So, and furloughs, layoffs, they are a thing. They happen. So, ultimately, you own your career. Your career is ultimately up to you. So, something that I've said to everyone I've ever mentored is, to the team, you got the job, great, good for you. What do you want to get out of it? Where are you trying to go? Are you trying to climb the ladder, or climb the mountain, as it were? Or are you just trying to do the best you can in the job you've got for something more specific? So, what are your goals and expectations? 2, an employment contract is a two-way street. HR reviews their side of the equation all the time. If you don't think you're getting your fair shake, or the environment isn't, or they're not holding up their end of the bargain, you're free to reassess that arrangement at any time. Okay? And if you are a leader, if you are a manager, a little bit of advice for you too. Step 1 is people in the loop, especially the people that you want to keep around. If you keep telling them that everything is fine, well, the facts, the actual on-the-ground facts, should reflect that. And 2, if you want to keep, it's like if you're trying to keep your best people, trying to keep the people you don't want to leave, put them where they are the most valuable, where they can be the most useful. Because in your position, you have the ability to defend them if the spreadsheet gods start targeting them for furlough or layoff. And there was, some difficult moments. Exactly what it was. All this stuff happening all at once, especially towards the end. I get home one day. It was a particularly bad day at work. I don't even remember what the instigating factor was. Toss my backpack on the ground. Sit at the table, look at my wife with a very dejected look on my face. Looked like I was completely defeated. And I just said, I think I'm done. I've had enough. We've been talking about the possibility of moving on to something else for a couple of months by that point, but I think there was just a point where I just said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. My sanity, my health, at some point that has to matter more. So, another piece of advice is, if the stress of your day job is getting to you and it's starting to affect you at home, starting to affect you, your physical health, stress does manifest physically, as I unfortunately found out. Don't be afraid to ask those difficult questions. Again, look at that other side of the equation. Are you getting what you want out of your job, out of your career? And it's perfectly okay to accept the fact, maybe sometimes a change can be a good thing. Again, this has been Above the Treeline Canyon Commentary. See you at the next summit.